Hi, this is Kathleen from Sunny Mountain Patterns. This is the tutorial on how to make this Starfruit color block top with pockets. You can use scrap material and see if you can piece things together, or you can use all one same color scheme like I did. That's all neutral. So first I'm going to show you how I cut out my pattern pieces. This is my projector file. If you are not using the projector file, using the A0 or the print at home, that's perfectly fine. But I just thought I would show off my features for the projector file because I worked really hard on it. So I have things mirrored, so you can lay one layer only, or you can do double layer and just use the left-hand side, for example, of the patterns. We're going to weight it down, and then you can use a rotary cutter. I find to be the easiest way to do it. And a ruler to help weigh down the fabric. Also, please note, you should iron your fabric before cutting it. I didn't. It makes it a lot harder. And then cut to make sure that the you're not in the way of the projector. And also make sure your rotary cutter is, in fact, sharp. So that's how you do double layers. I just did one side. And then since I folded over, I'm just going to go ahead and cut my pieces double layer. So I'm only choosing one side. If you choose to do one layer of fabric, you need both sides. So you would use both left and right columns. I thought I would just give everybody the option. This is definitely why you need to make sure you have a sharp rotary cutter, because it doesn't cut through all the fabric all the time, and you have to, you kind of have to be a little forceful. You have to use your scissors. So you can see where I'm just using the mouse to move around the pieces that I need and then place them where I need them on the fabric. It's just a click and drag because it's Adobe. It's a Adobe PDF. Acrobat. That's the word I was looking for. So for straight ones, I just use the ruler. And of course, this is already measured out, so you don't really need to measure. You just use the ruler to make a straight edge. So in this case, you'd actually have to move it twice because I didn't provide mirror image because it's the same, whether it's one or the other. Now here are the top pockets, or the part that's going to cause the curve in the pocket for the front. So here I'm doing a single layer and using scissors. I'm going to let you know I don't actually like using the scissors with the projector because it pulls up the fabric and you have to really make sure that you're looking ahead and cutting and visualizing where the line's supposed to be. Yeah, I gave that up real quick. This is 300 times faster, by the way. It took me 15 minutes to cut all this out, and this is kind of a lot of pieces. Oh, I guess that is double layer. I lied. So a single layer would have done the other side as well for the fabric. You probably don't want a super big rotary cutter, so you can get around all these little nooks and crannies. So then next I'm doing a sleeve. This is the short sleeve, but of course the instructions are just as good for the long sleeve. You can of course use the center line there and cut it on the fold, and you would just have to actually cut two of them. These don't have to be mirrored because they're exactly the same front and back. Makes it very convenient. And by the way, this is me going quite slow. It was 15 minutes of me going quite slow and pretending to explain things because I knew I'd have to do a voiceover because my kids are playing in the background if you actually listen to the raw footage. So we're going to cut this out. Actually, I changed this slightly since I made the instructions to be a nice, clean, even finish. So you're going to notice a little bit extra cuts you're going to need to make. So we're going to onto the back, which I've chosen to be the original waffled type pattern. So here, if you wanted to cut on the fold, some people don't like cutting whole, you can cut on the fold. There's a center line right there. If not, you can do one layer. I think I'm lazy and I like cutting once, so I just cut on fold. But the center line is certainly shown there for you to have the option. It just depends on what you like. A lot of people with ultra short throws like to use single layers just because it can change the size just slightly. Please don't cut your finger when you're doing this. Yeah, I should have made sure I had a sharp wheel before I started this. Also don't cut your mouse cord if you're going to use this. If you're going to use a mouse, because you'll be set. So this is the muslin that I'm cutting for the other part of the block. Yeah, I totally didn't iron any of this stuff. So we're going to cut here and down and then up and around. But of course, the center's there, so you can definitely cut all the way around. So I'm checking to make sure that I've got all the pieces. And now we're going to go ahead and sew. So match up the center line of the back and just curve this around. I like to put the pins parallel to where I'm sewing just so I can double check that it looks nice on the other side and I've sewn the correct side to the correct side, you know what I mean. But for curves, a lot of people like to put the pins perpendicular. That's to keep the curves in place, but you can't check to make sure that you've got the correct side out. That's how I check. So then I like to do all my pinning as much as possible in the beginning. So we're going to do the two fronts. So you want them mirrored. Make sure that they are mirrored and not sewing two left sides. I've done that before. We're going to put right sides together for the pocket top because I want to be able to rotate the pocket top inwards and have a nice smooth seam and top stitch that. So we're pinning over here. I don't normally go this slow, actually. I just was going this slow for purposes of filming. You know what? I'm going to be honest here. I don't even pin sometimes. So we're going to sew along those curves for both sides. And then do the back two pieces together, the top and the bottom of the back. Oh, before we do that, we're going to go ahead and prep the sleeve. So you can put the sleeve facing right sides together to the sleeve, which you can't tell here because I use one color, sorry. Usually I have different colors, printed fabrics, so you can definitely tell one and the other. I don't know what I was doing today. So we're going to fold this over. If you have the updated version, which everybody will because I haven't released this out yet as of this recording, you're going to fold over a 1/4 inch and then it should fit beautifully. And go all the way to the left and right sides. And when you sew up, the seams will all be enclosed. So now we're sewing. This is the back, so it's the top and the bottom of back sewn together. We're doing it at 3/8 of an inch, which is 1 centimeter. And if you notice, for modern sewing machines, it's where the needle is in the middle of the foot. And we align basically the edge with the right hand side of the foot, which is what's holding the what's holding the fabric down. And you also notice I have a little bit of excess here. That's because I have of the weave of this fabric versus the weave of the muslin. The muslin's a tighter weave, and the top fabric is not. So you might have a little bit extra just based off of the differences in weaves or stretchiness of the fabric. So just be aware. And then we're going to do the pockets. So both left and right side, you forward and backward stitch and go around again 3/8 of an inch. So I'm generally using the edge of the presser foot as my guide. I know some people actually measure it. There's also, you can see those gradations on or hash marks on the plate of my sewing machine that show where it should also be. And I should be doing the other side. That's the other pocket, so left and right sides need to get done. These curves should match up nicely. It's just because of the way it's cut. The back one was cut pretty long and across, kind of a long stretch, so it's a little bit extra stretching. And then we're going to do both sleeves. So the sleeve wrist facing is going to help finish the sleeve. I don't do a folding up, but this causes casing, so you can also put in elastic. This is before we fold it up, right? So right sides together. And forward and backward stitch. I don't even know I did that. And the other sleeve. These don't matter because there's no front and back for the sleeve. It'll go on whichever way. For children's garments, a little bit more, you can have a little bit more symmetrical sleeves and still fit the kids. It's not like it's a two-piece sleeve for a lady's jacket or something. So here I've already just skipped ahead and flipped over the pocket to the wrong side, and then you can of course press it, which you probably should. This is just really crisp fabric, and then we're going to top stitch on the body of the garment. So not from the back, from the front. Oh, no, I lied. This is the wrist facing that I folded over, and I eyeballed folding it over. I'm sorry. I had to film these in segments, so it's been a while since I actually filmed this. And I have to do voiceover afterwards because my kids are very loud when I'm sewing. And then if you just cut the thread on the side of your machine, if you have one of those, now you have casing for your sleeve. You do both sides. Okay, now we're doing the top stitching. So you can see the right side and the wrong side. So we're popping it over to the wrong side so that the pocket now would be on the inside of the body. And we're top stitching, which is about 1/4 inch away from the fold. And we definitely want the top thread to be showing on the outside, because that's usually the nicest. And then we're going to go all the way around for the curve and forward and backward stitch just a little bit, and then cut the thread. Then we do the other side. But that's what it looks like when it's top stitched. This kind of sinks into it just because of the fabric, but it looks nice. So this is what we're going to do to finish some of the things we made. So the back is basically finishing. If you're going to finish, now is the time to do it. So I'm using my serger and just serging that edge there so it doesn't start fraying. You can, of course, use a serger just to sew it already as is, but I like doing both. It's more secure. So now we're going to top stitch that seam allowance that we just serged for the back in place. So just make sure that it has the seam allowance is moved to the left or right. You can either put it below or above the seam. That's your choice. I put it below. It's better if you press it in place, by the way. I'm just kind of a lazy sewer and I'm busy. And we're just going to guide it through along the curve gently. And then forward and backward stitching both sides. So you can see how I have a little excess over there. That's just because it was slightly stretchier, but it looks really good if you top stitch in place. So now we're going to pin the actual pocket or the pocket lining, so the full piece, to the fronts. I like to do this after I've attached the body, just because I like that nice smooth curve and I don't have to worry about maneuvering all of this extra material. So we're going to pin it in place so that we can sew it. You notice I sometimes do it upside down just because I want to make sure that the majority of the fabric is going to be on the left-hand side and the seam will be on the right when I put it in the machine. So when you're done with that, it'll flip over like that. Flip it over one more time, and that's what it's going to look like. That's the bottom half of the front. So we basically want these to all align. So now we're going to sew this from the flat cut, leave your needle down and pivot around and then go around the curve nice and smoothly. You can take your time on this one because it's kind of a tight curve, especially if you're doing a smaller version. I think this was a 2T. If you do, say, a 6-month-old one, it's going to be a lot smaller because the pocket's got to be smaller. It's just not possible to have the same size pocket for a little one. Not that they're going to use it. I mean, they're little. They're just so cute though with pockets. So pretend that actually finished because the thread actually broke right in between there. I just redid it off camera. So now that we have the 2 pieces, you have to do both sides, by the way. We're going to match the right sides together. So the bodice is going to face downwards, and we're going to sew this together. You can, of course, before you do this, finish the edges for the pocket. It's just the muslin doesn't seem to fray as much as the waffled fabric. So we're going to stitch this together. If I could just remember that I moved the camera and cut that part out, that would have been smart. We want to make sure that the pocket is lying flat because that's also part of the front. We want it to catch. You might need to do a little bit of zhuzhing if you have fabric a weave that stretches slightly in one direction, just because it's curved, so it's slightly on the bias, just slightly. So here's a good time to finish the seam for the front when you attach the front and the back. So I'm going to use a serger and go all the way across for both sides, the left and the right side. And then, of course, top stitch. Remember to top stitch the same side that you did, the same direction that you did for the back. So if the back was towards the bottom, you want to keep it towards the bottom. You definitely move the seam allowance over because that's the whole point, is keep the seam allowance down. Plus, it looks super nice and loose if you top stitch because you have put extra effort in it. So instead of the serging and top stitching, you can certainly do flat fell or a French seam. It would be a similar result. The French seam, however, is going to be particularly delicate just because it's 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Rather than the 1/2 inch or more or 5/8 that would give you a lot of room. So next we're going to go ahead and pin the shoulders together. Left and right side. So this is front and back together, right sides together. And then we're going to sew here, forward and backward stitch. Definitely, you don't want this to come apart. It has come apart before. I forgot to forward and backward stitch. I've been sewing for more than 15 years, and sometimes you're in a rush. Oh, and then do the other side, and then once you're done, we're going to go ahead and finish the seams for the shoulders for both sides. I figured out how to pause the camera and continue on. That's why I started serging. Okay, so we're going to do the front. We're going to fold this in half. Fold the front button placket in half lengthwise. And then pin to the front. I did some inaccurate cutting, so it's a little bit too long on the front for the bottom half. So please ignore that. If you have a love-hate relationship with your buttonhole maker, please see my other video on how to. It's a buttonhole hack where you don't need a buttonhole maker. I'll try to remember to put the link below. So now we're just stitching this at the 3/8 of an inch. If you aren't putting buttonholes in beforehand, if you're using the buttonhole hack, you need to do it before you do this. And all the way down. By the way, that piece should have gone all the way down. I cut it too short. That was my error. And then we're going to head and finish the seams. If you're doing the buttonhole hack, the seams should be finished beforehand, or else it won't work. Okay, so now we have the shoulders together, we're going to put in the sleeves. So wrong side to the right side, right sides of the sleeve to the bodice. You see that notch there tells me where the middle point of the sleeve is. I just cut it. I just fold it in half and cut it a little tiny notch. And then matching up the edges to the front and the back. For both sides, of course. Unless you want to go one sleeved and one not sleeved. That would be very fashionable. Okay, so now we're going to sew these together. So we're just going to start where the sleeve starts and not the whole length. Remember to forward and backward stitch and then go straight down. It's going to curve a little bit just because the shoulder seam is angled and the body is not. So it's going to curve slightly. I'm still making sure that the body is aligned with the sleeve, because nothing worse than sewing down the sleeve and finding out you have an inch gate pull because you didn't sew down the body because it slipped. Ask me how I know. All right, forward and backward stitch and then do the other side. Now, if you want elastic sleeves, here is the option for the casing that you've made before you fold it up. We're going to do half of the width plus 2 inches. You can make it a little bit longer if you want it looser. I don't recommend making it any tighter because little kids' arms get usually kind of chubby. You don't want to be cutting off all that chub. So we're using a safety pin. I have to use a small safety pin to fit through the casing. And then safety pin the other side so that it doesn't go springing out when you get closer to the end and then have to redo everything. Also ask me how I know that. So you can, of course, pin the other end to the sleeve so it doesn't get moved. But, even if it gets sucked into the casing, at least you can push it back out. So just squish it around. You can use a bodkin here if you want. This is, I think, 3/8 inch width or 1 centimeter width elastic. You can use a 1/4 inch as well. That will fit. 1/2 inch probably is the maximum width you can go. And then do a lot of getting upset at yourself for making the casing too small to use the big, nice big ones. So we're going to stitch that down there and then stitch the other end, which we see it almost got sucked in. Stitch that down there and then continue on afterwards. But you would do, of course, both sides. So we're going to finish the shoulder seam by starting at the beginning of the sleeve and going to the end of the sleeve where it connects to the body of the garment. And then pull it off. I guess you could do the whole thing. Then it would be already finished. So now we're ready. By the way, do both sides. I just showed one side. So now we're ready to put the sides together. So we're going to sew the side seam all the way down from wrist down to the waist. Push the seams towards the sleeve. Makes it much easier. In fact, you might actually want to sew from the bottom up. You can unroll if the wrist facing extends all the way to the seam allowance. Go ahead and unroll that one little bit if you can, and then sew over it and then roll it back up for the extra fold over to finish it. So we want to make sure that we have caught, there you go, we've caught the, so you want to move the seam allowance forward, and then we want to make sure we've caught the pocket, because the pocket makes part of the body of the outfit. And then we're going to sew this. Forward and backward stitch. You want that to be nice and secure because that's the wrist facing. So if you have the wrist facing that extends out, which you should, just pop it open. One roll open, not both rolls, and then sew down and then pop it back in. So put the needle down when you get to the armpit and lift up the presser foot and rotate and put it back down. So it's one continuous seam. It's much easier to do, like I said, if the seam allowance is towards the arm. So there, I just made an adjustment to make sure that the pocket was aligned with the corner because I want to catch the pocket as well. And forward and backward stitch. Somehow I did not cut this very well. So we're going to finish the seam for the side seam. And go all the way down. So in the case of this with armhole, you're going to have to put it, rotate the body towards you so that it makes this as close an approximation to a straight line as possible, since we have a serger. If you're using fabric that you don't need to finish, by all means, don't. This is just the extra step and when to do it. Okay. So now that we've seamed all that, we're going to put on the neckline. So this is for already made bias tape. You can make bias tape yourself. I use the 1/2 inch wide, single fold or double fold. I'll show you the double fold first, mostly because I actually bought too much of the double fold. It was a single fold. And this is the first way with the double fold, which I'm not going to finish because I didn't like the double fold as much. So we're going to pop this open. Oh, we're not going to pop it open. We're going to leave the corner and then pin it in with the fold of the double fold aligned with the neckline. And then we're going to leave about a 1/2 inch on the other side so that we can fold it over and have a nice smooth finish. And all the way around. This should be easy to do because the bias tape should also flex at the same time as the neckline. So we get to there, and then I would cut off at it after 1/2 inch. So once you seamed all the way down, now we're going to ready to flip it over and tuck in the ends. Or tuck in the ends and then flip over. So we're going to fold the second fold of the double fold over and then fold it over. Like that. If I could just have remembered to have moved it down so you can see, that would have been easier. And then sew along that fold. There we go. So that's not my preferred method. This is only if that's all you have is double fold, because sometimes you like, oh, that's a great idea. I realize it's a lot bulkier, by the way. So this is method 2. Whenever I catch up with my talking with the bias tape. So you're going to unfold the single fold bias tape, leave about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch so you can fold over for smooth finish, and then match that edge to the neckline. You want to make sure that your seam allowance for your shoulders, if you can, make it flat. You might want to press it flat if you haven't already seamed it. If you finish the seam, then, I mean, there's only so much you can do. Just push it to one side. And then go all the way around, unfolding that fold. And we're going to be, you can see that one's finished. So we're going to be stitching in that fold. So this is going to be about a 1/4 inch away from the edge. And then finish on and cover up the button placket as well. And then cut 1/2 inch away. So stitch along that line on the fold. So now we're going to the sewing machine. We're going to go ahead and stitch just along that fold. So clearly it's not a 3/8 of an inch. This neckline doesn't have to be so thick, but we want to make sure that the line of the neckline is aligned with the edge so that we catch it. We don't have any puckering holes that it's popping out. and forward and backward stitch. You may notice I don't actually have thread on it. I had to redo it, sorry. The camera didn't film it. Okay, so now that we have that side done, we're gonna open this up and then tuck in the tails and then fold over towards the inside. And then sew that down. You want to make sure it's not sticking out. And don't poke yourself in the thumb either with the needle. I've done that too before, especially not when you're dealing with white fabric. Oh my goodness. You got to get the red stains out if that happens. Okay, so we're making sure that the seams are flat and we're putting this on because we don't want any puckering when we're done. So you might as well check it now before you do everything. And then when we get to the end, we're gonna, of course, if you tuck in the end, and then fold open the seam if it's a seam that you can fold open. If you've already serged it, then just push it to the correct same side as the neckline was, or as when you did the neckline. Okay, so we're going to add in, pull that over, and then pin it in place, and then sew it. So this might be a little thick, depending on what thickness of your fabrics. You might want to go slow and then go all the way down. I don't know what happened there. So now we're going to hem by double folding half an inch, and then pinning in place. You do want to make sure that this is going to be the same length in the two fronts, the left and right hand side. You can probably tell I did a not great job cutting. I was kind of rushing it. So it's a little uneven. So you make it up by doing a little bit extra folding for the longer parts and a little less folding over for the shorter parts, just to bring them together closer in length. And you can, of course, press this first. And make sure that the seam allowance is pressed to one side or the other, or if you haven't finished it where they're together, open it up like a book. It creates less bulk. That's why I do it. So for the front, you can fold it over one time and then twice. If it's sticking out a little bit, you might want to trim the corner. I don't think I have to do it this time. Definitely need good pinning. All right, so we got to sew this down. Start off slow because that part's a little thick with all the layers there. If you have to, you can lift up the foot like I just did and move it a little bit so it can get over that initial big hump if it's really thick fabric. And we're just going to go about 1/4 inch from the folded edge. It's actually more important to be consistent with the right hand edge that you're seeing because that's the bottom. You want the hem to be even along the bottom, or at least appear evenly spaced along the bottom, so parallel to the bottom fold. And then all the way around. Make sure that these things are tucked in with sufficient width tucked in so that you can catch the edge when you are sewing. So you're not done and then you have the edge pop up and start fraying, because that's kind of annoying. I also apologize, my camera kept auto-focusing, which is quite annoying now that I'm watching it. So we're going to add buttonholes and and or snaps to the button placket and evenly space them. That one you're gonna have to go check what your machine says, or you can of course follow my buttonhole hack. And then we're gonna press these nice boat shaped seams. They are curved, so we use a chopstick or something else curved that won't burn your fingers, and then press it in place just so we get the nice curve. If you have slouchy material, you probably don't need to worry about this. Like you're using silk or something that's not crisp, like this type of muslin. If you use like the cotton muslin that's a double gauze and it's super flowy, you probably don't even need to worry about pressing. This is crisper linen and cotton, so it does need pressing. And those pockets are huge, by the way. You fit a lot in it. My kids fit a flashlight, bunch of flowers, good Lord, all sorts of stuff. But that was the tutorial. Thank you.